So one of the things y'all will learn about me is if you come to the first service and the second service, they're probably going to be different because, well, I don't know. I just kind of try to stay with the moment, and some of the songs that you all started with has kind of changed my vibe. So I want to thank you for that, and I am curious on what I'm going to say. It's not normal for me to get writer's block or to run out of things to say. If you hung out with me long enough, you know I got a lot of things to say. But as I was kind of preparing for this service, I did feel like I was getting some kind of writer's block or some kind of thing. And I knew that there was something inside of me that had like a little bit of anxiety, which is also something that I don't often feel, and I had to get curious with it. So in our time this morning, as we look at this, the teachings of this book, The 5 Questions by Dr. James Millen, I'm going to invite us to lean into some of the questions that bring up anxiety for us in our everyday life. I've found that over the years in my engagement with my own spiritual journey, where I started out in a tradition where it was kind of like, don't question God, was what we got told. And so as a person, they mentioned the Enneagram, Sue mentioned the Enneagram. I'm a type 8 on the Enneagram, if you know anything about it. It's a challenger, so telling me not to ask questions is probably not the way to go, because I'm gonna ask. And because I asked them, they told me to go. And so I fell into progressively open spaces. And over the years, it's been an interesting journey. What I said in the earlier service, and I think it's still an apt analogy of how I feel right now. How many of you ever try to learn another language, like using Duolingo or one of those apps? You just try to learn a second language? Yeah? Okay. So I feel almost like I've been practicing this other language kind of like by myself in isolation, and now I'm coming into a country where everybody speaks that language. And so, or most people speak that language. So I may say some words and I'm like, it's not fajita, it's fajita. You know, it's like I'm gonna basically be using some language that I know how to speak on the inside. And if you've learned another language, sometimes you can hear it and you can understand it, but when you go to talk, it just comes out differently. And you're like, oh, I knew it. So I'm kind of hanging out in that space right now, but the language is in there, and the language is going to come out, and there's going to be some things that I throw out that I've gotten thrown out for saying before that I'm going to throw out here, and we'll kind of see how things go. But I'm grateful to be here and be in this space, and to be in wonder with you all. A lot of people have been asking me, like, what does it feel like? What are you thinking? What's going on inside? And the only word that really, well, I say 2 words. The first word is wonder. I'm in a lot of wonder because this journey has kind of unfolded in front of me, and I've just not said no. If you were here for the Father's Day, I talked about this woman named Lori Harris, who, when I told her I was going to seminary, she said, oh, you need to try out Unity. And I said, I don't know what Unity is. And she said, oh, you belong in Unity, you belong in Unity. And she persisted to say it pretty much every time I talked to her. And I said, well, I'm not going that way. There's no such thing as that in my seminary. And so I went the path I went. And then when I got invited to do the Jody training here, I said, oh, hey, this is the place that Lori Harris was talking about. Maybe she tapped in and she just knew I was going to do this training here. And then lo and behold, here I am today. And I called Lori, who I hadn't talked to in a few years, and I said, you won't believe this. And she believed it. She said, I told you so. I told you. I could have saved you 15 years. So she may come here one Sunday. Maybe she's online right now. So it's been unfolding, and I've been kind of witnessing it. And I'm sure that many of you have had this kind of unfolding in your life, this kind of knowing that emerges from not knowing. And maybe it's like you see somebody and it's just love at first sight. And you're like, I know, but I don't know how I know, right? Or maybe you go to the animal shelter and you don't want a dog. I know what that's like. And then you see one and you're like, God, yes. And then it pees on your floor and you get used to it. I'm not talking about myself. No, I am. No, but there's just like this knowing without knowing how you know. And that's the space that I'm hanging out in right now. I'm knowing, but I don't know how I know. And I'm curious of what my unknowing is going to tell me I know. You know what I'm saying. So let's get into this. So the questions in this book that they focused on are questions, a couple of them are common questions. I think we encounter them in our lives, but in different ways. And the rest are less common. I'm going to focus mostly on the common questions just because of the tensions that they invite us to explore. The first question is, why am I here? Which is a more common one. Less common, what wants to know me? What wants me to release it? What is mine to do right now, which is a little bit more common. And then a really uncommon one, do I know how great I am? So, asking all of you, do you know how great you are? So enthusiastic. I know how great I am. Let's try it just a little bit more enthusiastic. You can say yes or see or shoulda or something, but just say it in whatever language comes to you. Do you know how great you are? Okay, there you go. All right, I believe you more now. All right, sweet. So in my life, generally speaking, when I look at the questions that are more common, like why am I here, it usually gets interpreted as something that's like, what is my purpose? You know? And for one reason or the other, when people ask that question, it usually kind of holds a little space of lack. You know? I'll give you an example. The first time I ever was asked that question about knowing my purpose was with a buddy who I served with in the military, and happy Veterans Day for those who served. And those who put up with those who served, because that's a whole other thing. Yeah. But what's your purpose? And we were sitting there eating pizza, Tucson, Arizona. I had never gotten asked that question in my life. He was just like, hey, man, you know what your purpose is? And I was like, what? He's like, do you know why you're here? And I was just wrestling with it because it just was new, a new thing. And I kind of played around in my head a little bit. I thought about some of the things from my tradition, what I was supposed to say, but none of it fit, so I just didn't say it. And I ended up saying, getting like hyper present and saying, I'm here to eat this delicious pizza and hang out with you and laugh at your silly questions. And he didn't like it. He got a little sad, and you could see like tears in his eyes. He's like, no, seriously, man, I don't know my purpose. And I laughed a little bit more because I used to have this bad habit of laughing at people when they told me their problems. I'm better now. And I said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? What's your purpose? And he was just like, man, if I don't know my purpose, I don't know my meaning. And then I was like, wow, hold on, this is a real thing. And I was like, do a lot of people feel this thing? And he was just like, yeah, man. And I was just like, wow. That's interesting, because it was definitely not a thing for me. Even I met my ex, and I guess it's probably why she's my ex. Her mom met me, and she asked me a question along those lines sometime later, but I still haven't figured it out yet. And she was just like, so what are your dreams and goals? And I was like, I don't have any. And then she was like, what? Aren't you supposed to try to impress me? You want to date my daughter, and you're going to not impress me and tell me your hopes and dreams? I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have any. So there it is. But usually that question, it brings out this sense of lack. It's like as if something's missing in you. And if you can figure out what that missing thing is, then you'll be whole. And then you can like live your life or enjoy your life or have meaning in your life or something like that. But the invitation from the indwelling Christ that we even told the children, we celebrate the Christ you are. And I was like, man, that would have been so awesome if I heard that when I was a little kid. Hey, man, I celebrate the Christ in you. Really? Awesome. You know? I heard something different. But from that indwelling Christ, these questions are asked from a place of fullness and not emptiness. There's nothing missing in you. Each and every one of us is complete right now as we are. And when we look at a question like that, why am I here? It comes from a fullness. It comes from an awareness, if we're able to tap into it, that is to say, like, more with a sense of wonder and curiosity and even excitement. Why am I here? Why am I here? Let me find out, because I'm definitely here for a reason. There's definitely a purpose. I'm here. I exist. I am. So what is that question like when you ask from a place of fullness? We're not taught that, generally speaking. We're taught some kind of illusory opposite. So I want you to hang out with that question for a second from a place of fullness, a place of wonder. Why am I here? Just kind of look inside and hang out with it. Back in 2008, during the housing crisis, I was a corporate recruiter, one of my many jobs. And I was talking to a guy on the phone, and I was talking to him about a job that paid about $150,000, which when you're making $50,000, that sounds pretty awesome. And the guy said, how are you gonna call me with a $150,000 job? How am I supposed to feed my kids on $150,000? And I was like, okay. And he was like, don't call me unless it's closer to 200,000 or somewhere in there. So I was like, all right, note to self and note in the computer, because I put it in our CRM too. And then the crash. And then I got a phone call. Hey, Gad, how's it going, guy? Hello? Hey, remember me? Called me about a job a few weeks back. I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, the one that doesn't pay enough. It's like, yeah. I mean, I was being silly, man. You know, all of a sudden, that $150,000 seemed like something, right? But before that, he was filled with something, probably himself and ego. But besides that, he was filled with something that he was like, hey, I'm full. I know who I am. I got this job. I get this money. I got all these things. As soon as that went away, he went away with it. And he was gone from himself. In the tradition that I practice, there's this saying that says, whether I abase or abound, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I know when I was growing up, they never said the whether I abase or abound part. It was always like, I could do all things through Christ who strengthens me, which is basically saying I can get whatever I want with my superpowers, praying or something. But the abase or the abound part is very important, because it's saying that whether there's less in the material world or whether there's a surplus in the material world, the fullness of who you are is always there. And you are always strengthened by this awareness that you are always full of what matters. And so when we look at this question, why am I here? I invite you to continue to look at it from a place of fullness. Another question that's somewhat common, or more so common, is what is mine to do right now? But again, when asked in a certain context, it also brings up this sense of lack. Like, what's my job? What is the thing I have to perform? What's this transaction I have to make? It's like that. But if you come from this place of fullness, what is mine to do right now is super awesome. Because you don't even know. I'm asking myself that right now. What is mine to do right now? Mine to do right now is to be present with you. Mine to do right now is to invite you into remembering who you always are, the fullness of your essential being, that the indwelling Christ is not a fabrication. It's the reality of who we are. It's the invitation that we bring into this world. And it emerges from only love. And yet there's a lot of people forgetting it. But why do they forget it? One of the questions that I think about a lot is this question of fear. Why do we fear? And I think that it's worth examining. In our society, there's a couple things that we don't like. when we are faced with questions. One of them is saying, I don't know, because a lot of us don't like it. Another one is being wrong. We don't want to be wrong. And in a lot of spiritual circles, they ask this question when you're all frustrated. They say, what are you like? Would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Right? I'm sure y'all heard that before. The first time I heard that was from a Course in Miracles person, which is an interesting question. But a lot of people, they only feel happy when they're right. So that question creates quite a conundrum, right? But it's why? It's because we're afraid of being wrong, of making a mistake. And there used to be a time, maybe thousands and thousands of years ago, for some people, and some people still live in this, where a mistake can be life or death. But many of us are not living in that situation. We're just not. So what would it be like if we grounded ourselves in our present reality and realized that a lot of us are safer than we think we are, and we dwelled with these questions, we lived with the answers that emerged, and then we invited others into these possibilities. Some people who actually are living in danger right now. Because there are people that are in danger. They're in danger because of what they look like, what they sound like, what language they speak. They're in danger right now because their benefits got cut. There's all these different things. And then there's this underlying reality that even in their basement, they are also full, but they need to be reminded too. But if all of us think we're empty, we're in some serious trouble. So I think about that, and I think about some of the other questions. And I think it's important to present a contrast. Some of the questions that we fear. So one of the questions that we fear is probably something like, what's your problem? You ever heard that question? You do something, what's your problem? Brings up a lot of stuff. What were you thinking? Brings up a lot of stuff. Or as my friend said to me the other day, what happened to you? He was trying to remind me of my former evangelical glory. I remember you used to be like this, man. What happened to you? Did you do yoga and drink too much kombucha? Nah, but these questions, they bring up stuff for us. And one that we're really afraid of. Russ, what's wrong with you? Yeah? We hate that word. Wrong. And it's not just about like, I didn't have the right answer. Like, what's 5 times 5? Something like 30. And it's like, that was the wrong answer. It's like, it feels like you're wrong. Like your whole existence is wrong. Like, what is wrong with you? You shouldn't exist. You know, how do we get like this? And how do we get out of this? Well, Einstein said you can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking you were at when you created it. Right? So first and foremost, we have to open ourselves up to a more expanded awareness, a more expanded way of thinking. And that happens often in community, being with people with different ideas, bouncing those ideas, realizing that there's some ways that you're looking at things. Like I posted, one of the last things I posted on Facebook, because I've been away from it for a while, I posted and said, one of the kindest things that someone ever said to me was, you sound stupid. You know, and sometimes we have to hear things like that and then reflect, but understanding it is not an indictment on our very existence, but just an awareness that there's a higher way of knowing, a higher way of being. And it doesn't negate who we used to be. Like, I don't go to a 5-year-old and go, why aren't you 27? You know? No, there's stages and there's ages, and we move through them progressively, ideally. We learn and we grow. We try things. I don't know if those of you who had kids, they draw a little picture of you and they go, look at that. You're like, what is that? And you're waiting because you have no idea. And they go, it's you. Isn't it beautiful? Doesn't it look just like you? And what do? You lie. You say, hey, you know what? That does look like me when I turn my head this way and, put something in front of it. But you tell them that because you're encouraging them, because you know that there's something emerging in them There's an artist emerging in them. There's a creativity emerging from them. They're coming from this fullness, and it just wants to come out. And what comes out doesn't look like what they think it is, but it will if you're encouraging, if you're inviting, if you, in your own growth, you remember when you were a little kid and you didn't know how to draw, or when you tried to speak a language. I know a lot of times I learned Mandarin as an adult, and a lot of kids couldn't do it because they were afraid of sounding stupid. They're afraid of making a mistake, so they wouldn't go out and say things to people. And I didn't care if I looked stupid or made a mistake because I had no purpose in my life. So, so I just went out and said, hey, I'm going to go out and just say stuff. And I went out and said stuff, and eventually I got better, you know? I even had a guy say, your Chinese is pretty good. You talk like a woman. I didn't know what that meant. But to him, I guess I don't know what it meant. But all my teachers happened to be women, just like in real life. And so he was just like, he said, your Chinese is good. You sound like a woman. I said, thank you, whatever that means. But I went out there. I put myself out there, you know, because I knew that putting myself out there wasn't going to make me lose anything. I wasn't going to become less by putting out what was emerging, you know, because all you can do is learn if you're open. And that is the invitation of all of us. And that's the invitation of these questions, the ones that are more common and the ones that are less common. And when we engage life living in questions and living in a perpetual state of wonder, yes, there's a less predictability, but there's always enough. There's always enough because you are enough. And enoughness, only enoughness comes from enoughness. You get what I mean? Does that make sense? Or does it not make sense? Come on, you can tell me the truth. Did I make a mistake saying that? I don't mind. But that's the invitation of this time, is to be able to wrestle with and live with questions, knowing that you will always be enough, that these questions are not about what's lacking in you, but about what fullness can emerge through opening the door of questioning and living with them. That being said, I have a few questions that have come up for me. Some of the things that blocked me when I first started trying to work on this message, because I too practice being human as, I don't want to all the time, but I practice it. And some things come up. So here's a couple of questions that came up for me as I was writing. It helped me get past this because I was like, man, I'm stuck. Let me write my questions. One of them was, will people in my life see me as completely abandoning Christianity? Because that's what, like I said, some people said, like, what happened to you? You know? So I've wondered about that, mostly because of relationships. I know that the indwelling Christ is never lost, and it doesn't really freak me out. But I know that for other people who have some challenges living without strict borders and lines and how they function, they might wonder that about me. And not just wonder that, because over time, I've had people say some really terrible things to me. I've had a person come to me and tell me, don't you fear burning in a double hot hell for what you're doing? And I was like, and that was when I was in the UCC. So you know what they're going to say there now. and I've been in wonder about that, you know? And I've had to realize that, you know, there's some folks I may have to let go because we're not vibrating at the same frequency. Huh? I'm using your language. Another one is, will I inadvertently say something that will sound like some old-time religion and offend someone here? Like if I come in and I go, the song today is Onward Christian Soldiers, marching as to war. I'm not going to do that. I was in the UCC for a long time. I got all the smooth words when it comes to that. But it might pop out. And if it does, just ask me a question. Like, hey, what did you mean by that? Because if I said that, I would have meant this. Is that what you meant when you said that? And I'll be like, nope, I meant something else. I meant whatever you were going to say. What were you going to say? I meant this. Oh, yes. Less cheers, kombucha, and we're good. Will the role of minister supersede my identity as an individual? Curious about that, you know? I've sat here before in the pews with my family and stuff like a regular old dude. And I am that. And will people say, minister, but now I have to not cuss and act like I don't drink and like just be regular, just be yourself, because I'm gonna be myself. I had this one instance where I was trying to be buddies with a guy when I first moved here, and he asked me to hang out, and he's like, I heard you were a minister, and I was like, oh, yeah, I am. And he was so cool, and then I joked around and said, I'm looking forward to hanging out. Maybe we can go out for a drink. And he's like, yeah, and I was like, hey, man, you like milk, right? And, and he was just like, yeah. And then he canceled. And then he just disappeared off my radar, and I ran into his wife one day, and I was like, hey, I was supposed to hang out with your husband, and it never happened. And I think it's because I asked him if he liked milk. And she was like, it was. I told him you were joking, but he insisted that you were a minister and that you wanted him to go out for milk. I will drink a beer with some folks. So let's be cool. And then the last one is, will some of y'all feel weird about me doing stand-up comedy? Because I told somebody I was starting to roll here, and they were like, oh, what about your comedy, man? You think they're going to carry it? Can you keep doing comedy? I said, yeah, I think so. He's like, you better check with them. And I was like, really? And I was like, eh. So that was a thing. So in the course of hanging out here and being with you all, there may be some things that come up. We're all human. But we also have the divine in us, divine that is constantly waiting to emerge, full of fullness, and always flourishing if we invite it. And so that happens when we ask questions. The way I look at questions, living with questions, is like being rooted. And you have a plant that's rooted, and it flowers, and it emerges, and it draws from its source. And then when you have answers, it's like cutting a flower off. And it's beautiful, but it also starts to die as soon as you cut it off. And so the invitation is for us to live rooted in these things so that we don't get cut off and start to get all crusty. Final thing before I let you go. In the Course in Miracles, it says that nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. We are real, which is another way of saying we are royal. You know that, did you? And so there is no threat ultimately to who we are. The only threat is the denial of who we are and the denial of that very same essence in others. And so as we prepare to go out in this world, be as real as possible, be as rooted as possible, see it in others, invite it into every encounter you have, and at some point, we will see a world that reflects the reality of who we are. So it is.